Hi, everyone. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. We're really excited to present to you Green Building and Transition, where we're going to go over some certification, current policy shifts as things are changing, and what design teams need to know. My name is Riley Killian, and I will be the moderator for our webinar today. I'm the manager of sustainability services at Jordan Skala Engineers, and I'm joined by our two wonderful presenters, James Brower, Associate Principal and Senior Manager of Sustainability Services at Jordan Skala, and Michelle Foster, Vice President of Sustainability at Home Innovation Research Lab. Before we get started today, we just have a couple of housekeeping things to go over. This webinar is accredited for those who are selected to receive AIA or PDH certificates. You will receive those within 2 weeks of the webinar. Also, if you provided your AIA number, we will report that for you. The chat box is disabled, but we do have our Q&A open, and we would love for you to throw questions in the Q&A box. We're going to try to fit them in as we go, and then if any questions are not answered, no need to worry. We will be sending out a Q&A document and a summary in the follow-up materials. Throughout the presentation, we will have a couple of poll questions, and we encourage everyone to participate so we can make sure that we're tailoring our conversation for everyone here today. Like I said, we will be sending up follow-up materials with that Q&A summary page, which will come a little bit after since we need time to respond to those questions. But we will be sending a copy of the recording as well as the slide deck. The presentation is copyrighted and owned by Jordan Skala Engineers and Home Innovation Research Lab, so please don't redistribute without getting with us first. And finally, at the very end of our presentation, we will have our presenters' contact information. So if you would like to reach out to them, you are more than welcome to do so. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Michelle Foster.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here today. So we have quite a bit that we'd like to cover today. Let me just first talk about the objectives and really what we would like you to take away from the session. First, we're going to start with what are the federal and policy shifts that we're seeing? I think that everybody knows that policy winds have been shifting in the last 6 months. Things are a lot different this year than they were the past 4 years and before that. And so let's unpack sort of what's been happening, how it's relevant to you, what you need to know going forward to make sure that you're successful. And even as we're talking about these, we want to make sure that you're open to how you kind of pivot in your strategy and how you can really future-proof your pipeline. We'll talk about certification programs and financing because green certification really is no longer just about marketing. It's also a financing tool, it's a QA tool, and it can be a very powerful innovation tool. So we're going to talk about different programs, whether it be NGBS Green or some other ones, that how you can use them to unlock capital, improve your performance, even in uncertain times and with things changing so much. There'll be a lot of discussion about practical strategies and compliance so that even though the political landscape might be very volatile, your project planning doesn't have to be. And hopefully you can take away actionable things that will help you going forward, including, which I always like to talk about, a real life case study of a building that's gone through the process, how it's used it, and things that might be beneficial for you to take away from that particular example. So let's talk about the green building landscape because it's changing. And we should talk about the elephant in the room right from the very beginning. Really, there was great federal momentum for green building and sustainability that has been going on for quite a bit of time. It really started with some landmark decisions made in the Obama administration, and then it was shored up with significant financing incentives during the Biden administration. But federal support for that has really been retreating. So we've seen a number of things that have been happening in the last 6 months that has really shown that, at least in particular on the federal side, that support for green and sustainability is waning, and they're not quite willing to want to play that sort of leadership role in that space. EPA has proposed to eliminate the Energy Star program. That includes not only the building certification, product certification, but portfolio manager. HUD and USDA has proposed to eliminate any energy efficiency and green certification requirements and incentives. That includes the green mortgage insurance premium reduction, some of the requirements to use a green certification program for the community development block grant, and then some of the other programs that they've had, again, over the last few years that have either incentivized or required that. We also have seen Congress kind of claw back the Inflation Reduction Act funds and budgets and spending that go towards energy efficiency and green and look to really reduce those. And as a result of this, we're starting to see a little bit, not in all states, but in some locations, some of the states doing the same thing. And yet, I think the big question is, you know, are corporations and real estate entities and developers, will they also scale back their sustainability commitments or really hold the line? And that has a lot to do with some of the things that we talked about just in the previous slide with it has offered in the past few years, not just kind of marketing and even those financial incentives, but other benefits such as really being able to promote innovation, being used as a QA tool.
I do have a question. I thought they had made progress towards not removing Energy Star. Do you have any or the latest update on that?
I do. It's a great question. And yes, you are correct. They have made progress. There is money that's been allocated both in the House and the Senate appropriations bill that would provide funding for Energy Star to remain. That was a great thing going forward, I think. I guess the only slightly unanswered question is if the administration really does not want to continue the program, will they feel that they have the ability to not continue the program even with the allocation of funding? In general, in the past, typically administrations, if they're funded by Congress to do something, generally has done it. I think there's been a little bit of discussion and a little concern that maybe that won't happen here because the administration had been so strident about taking the program away. But yes, much better situation we are in now. The funding is there. Congress seems very supportive, bipartisan support to continue an Energy Star. So I'm hoping that it's not going to be a problem when we go forward. But I do say there's just a little bit of question because there was so much concern because the administration was so really wanting to take the program away. James, would you agree with that
Yeah,
assessment?
because not only support with both parts of Congress, and of course yeah, they still have to vote on it, but a lot of industry support. So hopefully that momentum will carry it through, and we'll see Energy Star continue. I'm relatively optimistic that that we can see it. There's just because there's been such a big push from many different sectors for Energy Star to continue.
Yeah, I would say, particularly in the real estate sector, really one of the first times ever there's been this much support across the board with all of the different real estate, you know, the home builders, the leading builders of America, the National Multifamily Housing Council. I mean, any of those groups, they all weighed in together on the same letter to support it. Agree.
Awesome. Thank you both. And with that, we have our first poll question. Do you expect your firm will scale back their sustainability commitments? And I'll give people about a little bit to answer that question.
Oh, very nice. I'd love to see this from the audience that yeah, 70% say, yep, no, there's going to be no scaling back on commitment. So that's wonderful to hear from everybody.
Absolutely.
It is, and I was just going to say I hadn't prepared the slide for if that wasn't the answer, so I would have been in a pretty bad position. But yeah, I mean, I really agree that although this is really happening, and we're seeing a number of different things kind of drive this shift, let's talk about those first, and then we can talk about whether or not that policy change will impact the market. But, you know, definitely what we've seen, unfortunately, is this kind of reframing of, and the way we talk about green and energy efficiency and sustainability kind of, you know, being anti-woke. and really reframing it much more as a political decision going forward, as opposed to operational efficiency and some of the other reasons that we would want to pursue energy efficiency strategies and green and sustainability strategies. At the same time, there's been this overall effort to really kind of shrink the federal role, and reduce the regulatory agenda or impacts on the private sector. And I think that this probably isn't that much as a surprise, kind of looking back, because again, if you look back over the past kind of 8 years, we have been aggressively moving forward. Maybe the pace of innovation and kind of pushing towards some things was too fast and making it difficult for a lot of entities. Um, in addition, there was a lot of focus on what are the requirements for energy efficiency, sustainability, and green impacting housing and its affordability. And almost no matter where you live in the United States right now, there's a need for more housing. And housing costs have been rising, and affordability has really been one of the most paramount issues in really any of the major metropolitan areas. And so there's been this whole discussion and talking about how energy efficiency requirements and sustainable and green requirements really kind of only impacting cost, and not really maybe talking about the benefits and how they're actually can be helping to make housing more affordable. And then some of the things that really had started to become mandates, there was success in a lot of the industry sort of lobbying those that were too burdensome. Perhaps the pendulum had kind of swung the other way too much, and that's really kind of changed, and that's one of the reasons we're having this policy shift going forward. But having said that, I really don't believe that necessarily like all of this policy change is creating market irrelevance. And it encourages me to see you supporting what I thought and what I've been hearing from our clients, really that just because policies are shifting doesn't really mean green building and sustainability has lost its value. I think we've really been digging into what is that value, how do you get the most value and minimize the cost. But in the end, you really have third-party independent certification that supports quality assurance, that verification that happens when, for example, there's a verifier on site, ensuring that what an architect design is actually what gets built and it's installed correctly, can help in the long term reduce costs, reduce callbacks, reduce quality issues with what's going to happen with the building post occupancy, and really provides kind of a risk management strategy for that entity going forward with that real estate asset. In addition, we know that ESG really isn't going away. There was a really great study recently about all of the bills that have been tried to be proposed recently to sort of ban ESG and not have it been not be able to talk about it even. And when you look at it, anything that really passed was significantly kind of stripped down, because I think, again, these are things that are important to investors. So if you're a developer out there and you're looking to attract institutional or international money and investment, they still have, they're still looking for those ESG commitments. They're still looking to see what you're doing to ensure your building is green and sustainable. And green certification is one way to really demonstrate that in a very marketable way. And we're also seeing lots of jurisdictions that are not retreating from this. So Denver, I think the city of Dallas still has the requirement for their green certification, the state of Maryland that I live in, and lots of other jurisdictions continue to go forward with either looking for green certification or building performance as a metric for what they're looking for in their new construction or significant renovation. So it's not really the choice between either going green or not. It's really about being proactive and maybe pivoting to see where are you getting the value out of green and how can you reduce that cost so that the value is maximized and the impact on your business is sort of reduced as much as you can.
I just have a quick question here. What would the expected impacts be if lawsuits uncovered drive-by ratings and a lack of accountability by an oversight entity to hold company to standards?
I'm sorry, Raleigh, can you repeat that one more time?
What would the expected impact be if lawsuits uncovered drive-by ratings and a lack of accountability by oversight entity to hold companies to standards?
Oh, yeah, I think it would, I think that that would potentially be a problem. I think that it is the whole value of having somebody on site to be able to do that visual inspection and make sure that building is compliant. That is really at the heart of the value of a third-party certification. So I think the impact would be dependent on what the certification agency does in response. I think if the certification agency is quick and decisive and there is accountability, meaning that if somebody is caught doing a drive-by and they are banned from the program, for example, or not allowed to do those verifications anymore, and there's transparency in the process, then I think the overall impact would be less. But certainly if those measures or those actions are not taken, I think the industry would lose trust in that particular program. I think that that's really important. And, to be clear, as somebody who runs a green certification program, we have lots of QA checks on our side in place to try to make sure that doesn't happen. And they're extensive, and we could talk about that. We don't probably have time for that today. But in the few instances that we've had that happen to us, we have taken very, definitive action right away to sort of shut that down and put the word out that that will not be tolerated, at least for us, because we think that's so important for credibility. The most important thing I have really is our clients' trust that we're actually providing a third-party reliable certification. And so I have to shut that down and make sure that that's not something that people would worry about. I
In
hope that
addition to
answered the
that,
question.
well, I just wanted to add a few points. There's also what the certification is being tied to. If it's being tied to a loan, or if it's a low-income housing tax credit, or something that there's a clear financial tie, someone doing drive-by ratings, there could be serious repercussions if somebody is just penciling in and not following the steps and leading to the greenwashing. I've seen, in the early teens, there was a lot of press and lawsuits for projects that were LEED certified that weren't performing because things had been VE'd out after it had been approved. So it never actually made it into the building. I've seen stuff of lawsuits, EPA imposing heavy fines against people who falsely certify for Energy Star. So there are serious repercussions that exist for people who, yeah, just do the drive-by ratings.
And the last thing I would say is, if you are a developer or someone who is using a verifier, it is incumbent upon you to make sure that you're getting the inspections that you would expect and are paying for. Because I always use this. The number one thing we hear from our verifiers is the small mistakes that they find on the job site. For example, insulation not being installed correctly, right? And it can get fixed before the drywall goes up. It is not that a builder developer is not paying for grade 1 perfect installation of that insulation. It just doesn't happen. It's not malfeasance. It's just stuff happens, but it gets fixed. And so that's the real value for what you're paying for that verification and then the certification. And so certainly if anybody knows or thinks they're getting sort of shortchanged, that's not a good thing. And any certification body should be able to help you with that. So let's talk about the risks, and sort of like fits right in, with the risks of kind of doing nothing and abandoning some of the programs or abandoning sort of everything that's been happening up to now. First and foremost is higher operating costs, and projects that don't really deal with energy efficiency now are really just kind of locking in higher utility bills for decades to come. And especially now, while the technology and the ability to be more energy efficient is probably a little bit more affordable than it will be in 10 years, it's always easier to kind of do it early in the design process. And for a lot of like multifamily, which we do a lot of, there's no question. I understand that, the common areas, for example, is typically what the developers are worried about from an operating perspective. But it's something that, again, kind of does speak a little bit more to the affordability of your particular projects for whatever renters that you have coming in, and that their units will be more comfortable and slightly more affordable. It's always costlier to retrofit something. So again, doing it earlier in the design is always better than doing it later. And it's more expensive to just fix things that aren't done right the first time. So there's a risk there in sort of not addressing that from the beginning. One of the things that I've always said about green certification programs that can really be a benefit is that codes are just going to get more strict. They may get more strict at a slower pace than they had been, but we're moving toward stricter building codes, with every year. And one of the nice things about a green certification program is that it's pushing you as an architect or a developer to think about, how do I have a higher performing building to meet these higher performance standards before it's code, when a red tag would be devastating if you don't meet it when it's code. So it gives you a lot more flexibility to sort of figure out how you can get there in a cost-effective way with a supportive team of a verifier and your other project experts that can really provide some advice. Again, before you're like really on the deadline of having to do it for code. Because I mean, all of us know nothing is a simple change out. You cannot just swap out a door or a window. Like, everything is a system and everything is related. And so you want to be able to think through and have the time, these changes and redesigns of whatever project that you have. And then the last thing would be missed ESG and capital opportunities. It is really, I can't tell you how many times I have had a developer's project team call me. They're almost at their C of O, or they've just got their C of O, and now they've got someone who wants to actually buy that asset. They weren't looking to sell it, but they've got a buyer, but the buyer is only looking to buy green certified buildings because they have some ESG commitments, or that's where their investor money is coming from. And that's always heartbreaking. So you don't want to miss out on those opportunities in the future where lenders or investors are looking for that, but you didn't kind of build it in the front end, and now it's way too expensive. So skipping it now sometimes seems like a smart thing or a cost-effective thing to do, but when you look down the line, it could just cost you far more in value, risk exposure, and even reputational drag.
Can you also speak to the resilience piece and how green building certifications have requirements to this regard to help future-proof risk with extreme weather events?
Yeah, it's a great question. So for what my knowledge base, and James will have slightly different, my knowledge base is the National Green Building Standard. The 2020 version was the first time that it addressed resilience by having a specific section in the standard, and that if the building was designed to be more resilient than code, you could get points for that, and you can even get an NGBS Green certification plus resilience. There's a little preview. I'm going to talk about the 2020 NGBS, 2025 NGBS, which is coming out soon. They completely rewrote the resilience section because of the great interest in resilience, and we are seeing it written into some of the low-income housing tax credit programs and some other incentives. And so I think you're going to continue to see very specific practices that are really looking to make buildings more resilient, given the frequency of natural disasters that we're seeing and some climate events, with an eye towards practicality and being really pragmatic about what could you do to make that building be able to survive a little bit better, and the residents too.
Yeah. And certainly adding on to that with what we've seen recently with California fires, with the hurricanes in Florida, these things are pushing insurance costs up because of damage. So there's people working and thinking about, how can we tie green certifications with insurance to maybe lower some of those insurance premiums, because you have built to a program that does have a focus on resiliency. So one of our audience did bring up and point out that there's even some case studies and real examples with the California fires, that some LEED certified homes survived better than ones that weren't certified because they did have a durability component built into the green certification program.
Wonderful.
Okay, well, thank you, Michelle. I'll take over from here. Michelle gave us a great outlook on a lot of the policy shifts. She gave us viewpoints from, program administration. My stuff's going to really start getting into more and more of boots on the ground discussions with developers, activity with different programs. So, why does third-party certification still matter? Because as Michelle touched on, investors, they're still looking for risk abatement that green certification provides. Or maybe they're just looking to build their green portfolio. There are a lot of investors that, as an equity partner, they ask for certification, run into that frequently. Again, Michelle touched upon, local green ordinances, where Denver, Dallas, Alexandria, Virginia, they all have something built in that, just for, if you want to, as a compliance option, you can get a green certification and meet the local green ordinance. On top of that, utility incentive programs, just as two in cases in point, CenterPoint is the local utility for Houston. You don't have to get a green program, but if you do get a certification, they'll give you extra money in the incentive program for that certification. Then the Energy Trust of Oregon, if you get Energy Star certified, they'll give you a lot of money. It's a very nice incentive program because they're trying to make changes and reduce the burden on the local utility grid, and they know the impact that something like an Energy Star certification holds. Um, then on top of all that, and if any of the audience has sat with me in a discussion, I always lean into the value of product differentiation. You have a new constructed building that with a green certification, you're being tenants are evaluating you compared to a 30, 40, 50-year-old building down the street. With a green certification and knowing what's there, turn it into a targeted marketing strategy that with a list of items that your leasing staff can talk about. Give them clear direction to set your product apart from the 30, 40, 50-year-old building down the street. So, the certification, it can unlock capital, can be a tool for compliance, and it lends credibility. So what do developers still want? What's the business case for this? All developers, they want predictable, verified performance. The last thing they want is tenant complaints of some unit that's performing different than what they hear from when they talk about their neighbor. Things like choosing Energy Star products. Energy Star has been great. And yes, I absolutely love Energy Star and really hope it continues. Because one of the things that all of the EPA programs, WaterSense, Indoor Air Plus, Energy Star, not only do you have to meet an efficiency requirement, but it also has to work. Everything from faucets to light bulbs, there is a performance characteristic. And all of the certification programs allow and give points for things like Energy Star products. So, and again, what do developers want? They want that market advantage and with faster lease ups. So again, utilize this message with key metrics and for your leasing staff to message what you're doing. It makes no sense to go through everything, all the cost of a building, get certification, but then you don't message it. So please, if you get a green certification, please follow through and message it appropriately and get the value for what you're doing. And as we've already touched upon, there's a reduced risk. There is a resilience component. and certainly we have seen many programs that merchant builders that they get higher valuations on the sale of their property because they have a green program. And it's easier to get during construction than after the fact. Okay, so certainly we want to talk, as using real world examples. And, let's talk about NGBS Green and where it fits. So it is a national program that is ANSI accredited, which means that Michelle and her team went through a process, a systematic process. It's not something that they just threw things together willy-nilly, to lend credence. And from following this process of national and ANSI accreditation, it has been in the past recognized by the funding agencies. Now, some of these things are changing, but it has been recognized by HUD, Fannie, and Freddie for their green programs. So it is known, it's got strength and teeth behind it, to again lend credibility to developers and add value. It's a point-based system, similar to other programs, which allows a flexibility. Owners can identify and choose where the best places to put their money towards, to reach the desired level of certification. So a lot of good flexibility. And the thing that I love best, and we've kind of alluded to, it's a visual verification system. It's not just documentation that stuff's might be going into the building. No, you have to have a certified verifier come out and visually check and make sure that what is being paid for is actually ending up in the building and it meets specific criteria. Sometimes that's performance criteria. Now, in what this translates to, being, with a certified individual, about 95% of the certification process. So it means a fairly relatively quick certification process, which meaning, once the everything is complete and the verifier has submitted their information, it's a certification in about 1 to 2 weeks, as opposed to sometimes other programs that might take 3 to 4 months, for it to be reviewed and certified. Now, the thing is, with the certified verifier, we need to make sure that owners complete their client agreement, keep their certificate of insurance current, and pay their certification fees. Once those things are met, it's pretty smooth sailing, once the verifier has submitted all their documentation.
With what's going on with HUD, do you know what's happening with Fannie and Freddie?
Michelle, do you want to take this?
Yeah, so I do know that Fannie Mae is, every year they do a kind of reevaluation of all the green certification programs to determine, they have different tiers, and depending on the tier that the program is in, it gets different preferred financing. They're starting that process. They started it about a month ago. So that will set up what the tiers will be for next year. So it typically takes them till the end of the year, and then sometime early next year, they will publish what programs get what benefit. So they've started that, and that's going forward. I've not heard that Freddie is not going to do the same. So they have less of a formal process. So I'm assuming that they're going forward as well.
All right, so let's talk some project strategy. Yeah, project types. NGBS Green fits for a lot of different project types. There's new construction, land development, remodels, and with the 2020 version, the addition of assisted living and memory care, dormitories, hotels and motels, trying to fit more project types that had that residential outlook, but maybe they're residential adjacent. Building codes. And the 2020 NGBS is based off of the 2018 building codes, which is helpful if you're in 2018 or higher building codes. There's some good synergy between the credit points and just some of the natural green features that are embedded within the codes. Now, that's not to say that if you're 2015 building codes or earlier, that it's burdensome or harder. It's just not as much synergy. But we have plenty of people that are under the 2012 and 2015 building codes that achieve NGBS certification without huge extra burdens. Now, um, we also want to talk on project strategy. Make sure that if this is something you're thinking about, certainly the earlier that you can bring somebody on board to help guide and make the decisions, the smoother everything is going to be. We do have projects that come to us after the IFC has been issued that they now want to go. Certainly a few things have to change, but it's not impossible. But certainly, if you begin with the end in mind, things are definitely smoother and easier. So let's talk consultants. There is a lot of value in having your green verifier be your design consultant. There's certainly nothing against the rules. That doesn't say that an owner, an architect, or someone from the project team can score the project, build out the scorecard, and pass it to the green verifier. But your green verifier is the one who has the most up-to-date knowledge. Home Innovations does a great job of providing continuous updates. The other programs do the same thing. They communicate effectively to the verifiers. They're the ones that have the most up-to-date information and can help guide you to success better. Then in construction, a strategy point to make sure to bring up is make sure the construction team builds the verification into the schedule. We run into times where it's more of an afterthought, and friction and frustration can build if it's not planned. Maybe the construction team is thinking that, okay, this guy just has to walk by in 15 minutes and look at a few things and sign off. No, it's a very deep, involved process to look and evaluate and make sure that everything's up to snuff. For a multifamily project, that can take a day, and we verifiers have to come out twice, pre-drywall and then at final. Certainly pre-drywall, we need to see everything that's going to be hidden behind the sheetrock once it goes up, and so that process needs to be inserted after insulation and air sealing and before the sheetrock goes up. We've had projects where we come out and the sheetrockers are breathing down our necks, wanting, because they're waiting for us to finish, but it does take a considerable amount of time. So please build the verification into the schedule. All right. Now we're getting more specific. Let's talk about the mandatory requirements. Where do people have some sticky points of that they have to overcome? So the first one, a mandatory requirement for energy efficiency is manual JD&S calculations. Now, if you're unfamiliar, manual JD&S is a process, a methodology for load calculations of your HVAC, your duct sizing, and your HVAC system selections. There's still some people that utilize a square foot per ton mentality in determining about right sized of HVAC equipment. Well, certainly programs want to make sure that something a little bit more official is being followed to make sure that we achieve the energy efficiency. So they ask that the manual JD&S calculations be completed. Next mandatory requirement to talk about is air sealing. Now, the programs, NGBS Green in particular, modeled their stuff off of what's already in code, but sometimes these things aren't actually followed, and one of the reasons that it is because it's not clearly outlined in the drawings. I actually had a discussion with somebody this week about whether or not the air sealing measures were actually within the drawings. And this is on a constructed building, and now they're having humidity issues because the air sealing measures maybe weren't followed. way to get around it, make sure that it's in the drawings. Next requirement to talk about is grade 1 insulation. Many years ago, Energy Star came up with a qualitative method to evaluate the installation of insulation in relation to how many voids, gaps, and compressions. So, and really, grade 1 insulation just says that the wall cavities are fully insulated, which is certainly what the developer's expecting. You know, the owner is paid for, he didn't pay for only 80% insulation. He's paying for 100% insulation. So grade 1 insulation as a mandatory requirement just helps make sure that that owner is getting what he's paying for. Then a requirement that was added with the 2020 NGBS is if you are in an EPA radon zone of zone 1, then you need to have a passive radon system. And then after construction is complete, have testing to make sure that it's actively working and that you don't have radon within the living environment for the tenants. Now, on top of those, you certainly need to recognize that different regions can run into unique challenges. And we talked about how Florida certainly has been experiencing a lot of hurricanes frequently. Well, new construction, the fenestration will need to be impact resistant. Now, this has an impact on one of the energy efficiency metrics, the U value for windows. So it can be a little bit of a challenge of making sure that you meet both the impact resistance as well as the mandatory requirement of the U value for Florida projects. So hopefully you see from those things that it's not a huge ask for since these are the things that, like I said, the challenges that people run into, but they're easily overcome. Okay, so the question that everybody wants to know, how much is this going to cost me, James? And it's always the hardest question to answer because it depends on what your base construction specifications are. What are the local codes and amendments you have to meet? What level of certification are you going for? All those things have an impact and make it really hard to give you at the outset what the cost is going to be. But what we can say is, NGBS Green certification costs are lower than many other programs. And then there's that value for that third-party verification and ancillary stuff that's hard to quantify. How much was saved because a certified expert actually evaluated the building during construction? And I have a great anecdote. And on an NGBS Green certified project in the city of Dallas, in the building out the scorecard, Energy Star bath fans were chosen by the owner. So the designer put in Energy Star bath fans into the drawings. The construction team submitted a submittal for Energy Star bath fans. Guess what was not installed during construction? It was actually the builder grade bath fan. At the time that this occurred, there was a $30 price difference. I'm sure y'all can quickly do the math of what a $30 times 300 units comes out to be. That's what the trade contractor who had swapped out the builder grade bath fan was going to pocket. And the only reason it was found is because the third-party verifier popped off the cover, as we're supposed to do, and checked the bath fan. We found it because of third-party verification. Now, certainly Michelle and her team has done lots of analysis. And so on average, the cost to get NGBS Green bronze level is going to be less than 1% of your total construction costs. Yeah. Certainly expected miles and performance will vary based on where you're at, but it's the best answer we can give people on that initial outlook. All right, so again, let's get into specifics. Our friends at Lantower Residential allowed us to present to you the Lantower Midtown Park project in Dallas, Texas, getting NGBS Silver. It's just a standard, your 5-story multifamily development, garage wrap, with an average unit size of 930 square feet. Again, with the Dallas Green Building Ordinance, since they were getting certification, this was their compliance pathway to meet the City of Dallas's Green Building Ordinance. But Land Tower likes to do NGBS Green regardless, so it aligned really well with the local requirements. Okay, so what did they actually have to do though? So, well, for their lot design and development, they had, garage wraps have very strong density. So their 84 units per acre maximized their footprint use and got some good points. It was a garage wrap with center parking. So, certainly this led to a 75% smaller footprint than if it was all spread out on the ground. As well as they were walkable to mass transit, integrated with local sidewalks, utilizing native landscaping and stormwater controls to get good points in the lot design and development section. Resource efficiency, 90% of the building was prefabricated floors and roof, which leads to less waste. They used engineers' trusses and optimized framing. All things together led to minimal construction waste. Water efficiency, drip irrigation for landscaping, low flow lav faucets at 1.5 GPM, as well as other low flow fixtures, and Energy Star washers and dryers. Moving to energy efficiency, they had a 15% UA improvement. UA is about the energy efficiency of your envelope. So they had a 15% better performing envelope than standard code. Energy Star appliances. So not only just the washer and dryer, but also the fridge and dishwasher. Again, utilizing the known metrics of not just resource efficiency, but performance. They also had advanced sub-metering of the units, as well as occupancy sensors in the common areas. For indoor environmental quality, they used low VOC paints and low emission insulation, had MERV8 filters and effective ventilation, and had no smoking in the common areas. So all these things promoted health and wellness by, a walkable design that encouraged activities and materials that met strict emission standards. So nothing too burdensome, nothing too strenuous there. Hope you all agree. So next slide, please. So bringing it home, the summary, they were able to achieve NGBS Silver certification. They had reduced energy, water, material waste, as well as enhanced resident comfort and indoor air quality. Again, leasing strategies, verified things that can be talked about to increase your lease-up rates. On top of everything, they met the Dallas Green Building Ordinance and ended up with measurable operational savings. So key takeaways, as we've been saying, green certification is certainly achievable alongside code compliance. Sustainable features add financial value and long-term durability. And certainly NGBS offers a practical, scalable framework for multifamily projects. Now, this, of course, was focused on NGBS Green to be able to provide you very specific examples, but the same is true for the other green building programs. As well as Energy Star, Lead for Homes. There's a lot of good quality green certification programs that have been vetted, have been approved, have meet certain very rigorous standards that everybody can feel comfortable with, so that they're not get accused of greenwashing, but give them key metrics for success and communication for a targeted leasing strategy.
And with that, we have our next poll question. Which of the following would most improve your experience with certification? Just going to give people a second to answer. All right, we got a pretty even split across the board.
Very even.
All right.
So if you are interested in NGBS Green, we have a lot of support for any type of project that you might have and whatever role you might play, whether you're an architect, a developer. If you go to ngbs.com, which is the website, there are lots of resources, including case studies on a variety of different buildings. So you can see not only what James mentioned with the multifamily project that they have, but supportive housing. There's a shelter in Detroit. There's affordable housing, very low income, garden style apartments, high rise apartments. There's really kind of a whole host of different project types that you can see there. We also offer what we call the Bronze Cookbook, which is a filled out scoring tool. So you can see the most commonly used practices to achieve bronze, and there's one for gold. So you could just sort of see what are the practices that a building would likely pick to get up to the higher level, should that be something you're interested in. So I encourage you really, whatever you might need to want or need for your project team, to go and look. And then most importantly, we do have a contact us, which we promise to do a one-day turnaround. So if you just fill it out, you have a question, you need interpretation or technical assistance, we typically can get back to you in within one business day to help you out. We know that you can't be sitting around waiting for advice, but we try to make the program really as user-friendly and as pain-free. And we're also always open to specific advice for improvements to how to make it better. And then last and exciting news is that the 2025 NGBS is coming out. We expect it probably late-ish fall, so I'm saying end of October, maybe early November. It's really fully done now. All the consensus committee work has been done, and what it needs to do is just be packaged up and sent over to ANSI for their review. And what they do, as James had mentioned earlier, is they will look over the process. They want to guarantee that it was open to the public. There was ample opportunity for the public to comment and have input. The public comment periods were long enough, the proper processing was followed, and then we hope to be able to get that also approved as an American national standard, like I said, and be available sometime, say, late October. As soon as it is available, it would be open for certification. So you would be able to use either the 2020 or the 2025. Having said that, we have no sunset date whatsoever for the 2020 NGBS set. And I don't think we will for a while. There's a huge diversity of baseline state codes right now. And we really don't want to provide a disincentive, so that if you're in a state with a lower baseline code, we don't want green certification to be out of reach. We always just recommend that, working with your verifier and your experts, that you select the version that makes the most sense to keep you as an above code project. So maybe you stay at 2020 at the bronze level, depending on the state, or maybe you go to 2020 NGBS silver, or maybe you go into 2025 NGBS at the bronze level there. So there'll be a lot of choices and information we have available. A couple of big kind of headlines for the 2025. There's a brand new property certification. So this would allow for an existing multifamily or mixed use property. So if you have multiple buildings, typically the way we do it is we certify every single individual building, and every building must be compliant. Here, what it would do is it would allow you to certify the entire property. And that might be beneficial if you have buildings, for example, maybe they've been retrofitted at different times, so their performance baseline is different. So you're kind of averaging across buildings. So that's totally brand new. There are a lot more practices that are focused on resilience, as I mentioned, but also resident wellness. We've seen a lot of multifamily clients recently. They earn the NGBS Green certification, but they're also getting that additional wellness certification, and they really lean into the marketing of the wellness aspect for their incoming tenants or prospective renters. The baseline is getting higher. So as James mentioned, the 2020 NGBS is based on the 2018 I codes. The 2025 NGBS, the baseline for energy efficiency will be the 2021 IECC, but then they have used a lot of the mandatories for the other chapters from the 2024 IBC and IRC. So there's a little bit of a split there, but essentially, like always, as I mentioned, the baseline performance is getting higher. And there's a lot more flexibility. It is more complicated. because by giving more flexibility, it gives you so many more choices that it's a little bit hard to navigate. So I'm going to highly encourage people to maybe not only look at the resources we provide, but speak with your green building expert, whoever that might be, whether it's James working on the project team or somebody else from Jordan Scala. But they'll be really able to help you figure out what makes the most sense for you going forward for any projects that you have that are in planning.
Another poll question. What are your firm's drivers for green building certification? I'll give people a second to answer that. Awesome. Compliance is top of the list, everything else close behind, risk mitigation being the last one.
It has to provide value, though. It all comes down to where you're finding the value.
Exactly.
Yep.
So the final takeaways is that I think even with the kind of crazy shifting political winds and sands and the way the regulatory environment has really been changing, and it's been a lot to keep up with. I do think NGBS Green certification is still going to matter going forward because it really produces that value. So it doesn't erase the market demand. I should have noted earlier, surprisingly, the Federal Home Loan Bank of Atlanta just recently came out with a new financing incentive for buildings that get green certification. So maybe new incentives are still on the horizon. We just haven't seen some of them. I think as long as we remain cost effective and credible, it'll be a good choice to have as a discussion for any project that's in the planning stages or that you're starting to think about. And really, as codes tighten and labor challenges continue to grow, which has been an increasing issue, that verification is really going to offer some essential oversight and consistency and quality assurance going forward to really mitigate risk and ensure you're delivering a quality real estate asset going forward. And flexibility, the 2025 will have a lot more flexibility so that you can really figure out for your project where it's located, what the budget is, how you can make it fit.
Wonderful. And with that, we do have quite a few questions left to answer, but we will answer that in our summary document that will come out with the follow-up materials that we should be sending out in the next few days. We do have one final poll. If you would like James or Michelle to reach out to you, please let us know on the poll before you hop off. And thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.